the U.S. is trying to decouple, in my opinion, supply chains from China. Everybody thought China would become more open and democratic, and in fact, that hasn't happened.
Why did Indian foundries fall behind? Why have they not grown to the extent that China has in the last 20 years?
What happened in China, I don't think will happen in India.
Why aren't US companies buying and sourcing from Mexico? Like, why are they coming so far all the way to Asia? Where do you see US foundries going at the back of all this? What is a normal labor salary like in the US? Like, how much are you paying per day? I'm going to ask you the cliche question. What is your whole take on the tariff situation? If you're a Foundry professional, the chances are that your education really only began the moment you stepped foot into a Foundry and will never end, because experts say that Foundry is a lifelong learning process. And that's why we've created the Foundry School. It is exactly what you need to save your business, take your Foundry to the next level, or if you're getting started, kickstart your career. So here's your once-in-a-lifetime chance to be part of a global community that could be much bigger than ourselves. So join our 30-day trial and kickstart your Foundry career today. The link is going to be below in the description, and I'll see you on the inside. And if you make it to the inside, congratulations. And we seem to be live.
Okay, great.
Yeah, hi Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's really nice. Looking at that map that you have in the background, I can point exactly where you are, but actually I can't. I think it's a map of India.
That's a map of India. Yeah.
So you're living India like whole heart and soul.
Right. Yeah, I have India on my wall. I live in Western North Carolina, in the mountains of the western part of North Carolina. So we've lived here for 12 years. It's kind of a semi-retirement location.
Yeah, I remember the mountains are calling and I must go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if anybody can make sense of what's going on today in the world between the US and not the rest of the world, but particularly India, I think it's definitely you, because you know a lot about the tariff situation. I hope, being so close to it. So that's definitely something I want to go on about. And
Okay.
you also been importing a lot of castings from India in recent years. I think over the last 6-7 with Synergy Global. So
Right.
you definitely know the US market well, right?
Well, right.
And then
yeah.
again,
Certain aspects of the U.S. market, we don't deal in automotive,
Right.
but we're in a number of different segments.
right. So let's just get going. I think for those of you guys who don't know, Mike is he was part of the company Ashland in the US, and then later he was the managing director after going senior vice president, I believe, right, of Ashland US.
Right.
After
Yeah.
24 years of working with them. Yeah, and then you became managing director of the Indian arm, and that's pretty much when you made it to India, and that's how you got the background.
Yes, I was able to start Ashland India Private Limited, so that was my claim to fame in about 2006.
Yeah. So walk me through a little bit of your Ashland journey, which is today, I believe, ASK Chemicals, right? You told me it had been sold to private equity.
Yes,
Right.
Ashland sold the business to a German company who subsequently spun it off to private equity. So it's been owned by private equity for a number of years now.
Right. So what was your experience like with Ashland, and also I definitely want to know what drove you to India. So let's just get going.
As you mentioned, I manage the casting solutions business worldwide. So it was a very large business, very interesting business in Foundry, in that Ashland was the inventor of the cold box process, the phenolic urethane Isocure, and the no-bake PepSet technology. That really
I didn't know
was, yes, that's sadly interesting, because everybody used to know that Ashland was the founder, the inventor of Isocure and PepSet and the cold box process. So it was a company based on innovation and worked extremely closely with foundries to implement that technology. At one time, it was a big major step to go from heat cured processes to cold box, for
Right.
example. And so I learned a lot about foundries and the importance of your technical people really understanding the customer's processes, how to implement our technology for productivity, for quality, for cost savings, and for capabilities that we could bring to our customers' foundries. So that got me started. I worked in a number of businesses at Ashland, but the one I was with the longest and the one I was with prior to moving to India to start up Ashland, India, was the foundry consumables. So that gave me a chance to go into a lot of foundries around the world and get to know the foundry industry.
I think the consumable business is probably the only type of business where you get to go into foundries to understand processes, and you get to understand a lot of those shop floor activities that are going on. So that's a really nice place to be in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, and you have to get a good understanding of the industry overall. And since our business was a global business, that forced us and myself in particular to understand the global situation for castings.
Right.
During that time, that's when I invented the term at our company called floating castings. Floating castings mean that if a foundry shuts down in the U.S. and your business is going flat, it's reappearing somewhere else more than likely, like Mexico or Brazil or China or elsewhere. And so it made us manage the business on a global basis instead of a country or regional basis. We focus specifically on foundry, and we globalized our technical service, our R&D, our support in the field so that we could keep up with the floating castings.
That's good. So, also to your point, why did you pick India? Because this was back in 2006. I believe the foundry sector has really grown a lot since then. But back then, why India?
Well, so a little bit of background. I made my first trip to India in 1981, which I'm sure you weren't even born yet, Ian, in 1981.
And you are right. You are
Yeah,
right.
I traveled several times to Baroda, and we sold a technical package to Indian Petrochemicals Limited. And back then, 1981, India was a much, much different place. At that time, your parents or your grandparents, they had to wait for months, maybe even a year, to get a car. And in Mumbai, I mean, when people were begging in Mumbai at that point in time, they really were in bad shape. Now, yes, they come up and knock on the car window and sell you a magazine or whatever, but they also have mobile phones, and it's a much,
Right.
much.
Right. The standard of living is really improved. Right.
So I've always been intrigued by India. I've had the opportunity to be associated with India over the years in different businesses. And in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, Ashland began to look at its businesses differently. And to be honest, the business I ran was being combined with other Ashland businesses. And so I was the one guy running a large business that was saying we really need to go to India. We need to look at India. We need to develop all of our businesses in India. So I guess the CEO decided to ship me off to India, and that's where I went. My wife. My wife was a little hesitant, but I was able to make one trip to India prior to accepting the offer, and we spent a nice few days in Goa, and in Mumbai, and she decided, yeah, I'm okay with India, and so off we went to India, and it was a great experience. But I went from managing a large business, maybe 3,500 people, to starting up a business and, and hiring freshers uh, and so on. So it was a different experience for me, but one that I would never trade for anything.
Right, right. I think especially starting up and getting things running off the ground is much harder than growing an established business, because you have a lot of helping hands that have already proven themselves, and they've been recruited at a certain level. But when you're starting from the ground up, there's no culture that has been set. There's no standards that have been set. So all those, like, you really have to get in there in the mud and start things out. Yeah. So
You're right, and we tried to establish a cross country Indian culture. So everybody, tech service, sales, even my assistant in the Mumbai office, they all had Blackberries. Now in 2007, that was unusual, but I insisted that we have perfect communication. We did team building, which at that time was kind of rare in India in 2006, 2007. Now I think it's pretty common place, but we worked together as a team. The competition was outside the company, not inside the company, and
right.
it was a good experience. I loved it, and yeah, it
Right.
has different kinds of challenges. A larger operation has significant challenges, but they're different than startup. That's true.
So what were Indian Foundries back in 2006 like? Like, what is your earliest memory of Foundries in 2006?
The big difference was they were small in scale, and again, we were uh, we were trying to establish our primary product line, iSecure, and other cold box processes. We wanted to build those up in India before we committed to a production in India, and so that meant a lot of concentration on automotive. And at that time, the foundries in India making blocks and heads and other components were uh, small. There were too many of them, and so it was pretty clear to me that they had a long way to go to get up to global standards in terms of capabilities.
Right, right. All right. So let's fast forward to your 3 years in India, right? Uh, I think was there a reason you shifted back? Like, your mission was completed in 2009. What
No,
was?
originally we were going to be there for at least another couple years, but as you know, the economy suffered a major global recession.
Yeah, the
So,
2008 2009 crash. Yeah.
yeah. So I was a very expensive expat, and the company had to reprioritize its resources, and I came back to the U.S. and took an early retirement with an excellent package that gets offered sometimes to U.S. Managers, and so I decided to go into consulting, and that's what I did starting in 2010. Ashland was going through a transformation of its own, and it was a good time for me to do something else. I
Right.
decided to consult, and I consulted for a number of years, primarily business strategy related, growth related. I had European, U.S., Indian, and even a Chinese client or two during that time period, all pretty much related to the metal casting industry. So equipment manufacturers, consumables like like crucibles, and so on. So M&A work, merger and acquisitions, due diligence, and so forth. So that's what I did a while, a number of years, and it was fun. But I had met a company in India when I was living there, who helped me understand Indian manufacturing. They were the best company that my team could find on manufacturing quality, and that's Synergy, who I have been working with for 6 or 7 years now. And they were helping multinational companies, large companies like Schlumberger, develop their supply chain into India.
Brief me a little bit on what Synergy exactly does. Because I think you joined them about 7 years prior, right? 7 years back.
We work with foundries, machine shops, forges, and so on, to make primarily engineered components. The more complex, the better, frankly. And we focus on providing those to medium-sized OEMs in North America. So that's what we do.
I think at this point, you probably have been to a lot of foundries or started working with a lot of foundries in India to be able to source castings. So, what does Synergy exactly look for in a foundry? Like, if you had to boil it down to maybe one or two exact questions that you would ask a foundry and immediately be able to sum them up, what would those two questions be?
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer in just a few words. Like I mentioned, they have to have the quality capabilities. They have to have the capabilities technically, to provide what our customers require. Um, they have to be realistic in terms of being competitive. You know, at the end of the day, in the U.S. and Canada, uh, foundries in India are competing, not with local foundries here, but with Chinese foundries. I make no decisions in India on supplier selection. The team in India makes all those decisions. If I get involved, frankly, it's the wrong thing to do. So I stay out of
Correct.
decision making. But we're very grounded in quality, manufacturing quality, process quality. We audit our suppliers. That's, Synergy used to do that as a business. Now they do it as part of the requirements in doing business with us. So foundries need to realize the value add that Synergy is adding to the entire process. I mean, we do the sales and marketing here. We manage the relationships here. Uh, we're supplying, for example, a sand casting, but in many cases, we're arranging the post cast processing. So, machining, plating, heat treating, whatever. We manage all of those areas so that the foundry doesn't necessarily have to do that. In some cases, they do. In some cases, we go with the foundry's historical machining or post cast processing. In other cases, we don't. We have very transparent communication with our customers, weekly updates. One good outcome of COVID, I always try to look for the positives, but video conferencing has been a blessing for us, because we're able to get our team of technical experts online with our customers' technical and procurement teams, and that makes a big and huge impression, frankly. China, it's interesting, going back 25 years ago or so, 30 years ago, when I first got involved with China, with a wholly owned foreign enterprise. Everybody thought China would become more open and democratic and westernized, if you will. And in fact, that hasn't happened. And in fact, in the last 10 years, 5 years especially, China has become more insulated. So you don't see Chinese on Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn is frowned upon in China. WhatsApp. I mean, uh, so that shutting off of the Chinese folks, that has a big impact on how they're able to communicate with North American companies. And India doesn't have that as a drawback. In fact, Indians are very innovative in communicating, just as you are, Ian, with your podcasts and so on. So, uh, that it's an advantage for us to be able to connect our customers here with our Indian supply chain.
I think you presented a paper. You presented a very good paper at China, the Chinese Foundry, I think, organization it was. Uh, and I think why don't you just tell me a little bit about the study that you made? I think you estimated that the Chinese production for Foundry would double.
Yes, so this was a paper I wrote for the American Foundry Society Casting Congress,
What year was this?
2006. Myself and the chairman at that time of China Foundry Association, we presented a paper at the American Foundry Society Casting Congress, and it was all about. It was called an overview of the Chinese metal casting market. At that time, Chinese metal casting production was about 11 million tons a year. It was about the same size as the U.S. And and it had doubled over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So it was an interesting market for us at Ashland. It was a hugely interesting market. We had started up a wholly owned foreign enterprise to manufacture and sell and service our foundry products. And so we presented this paper, and we boldly predicted during the course of our presentation that Chinese metal casting would double in tonnage over the next decade. So that's what we predicted. What actually happened was it quadrupled. So Chinese metal casting reached well over 40 million tons. I don't know what the current number is, but it was a huge growth. The whole concept of the paper at that time, I was presenting it from the perspective of trying to get uh, U.S. foundries and foundries from elsewhere to go to China and invest. And in fact, some did. Some of the leading foundries and in the U.S. they did set up major metal casting facilities in China, primarily to follow their market. And so that did happen. But the big news there was our bold prediction of doubling in 10 years was off by
But really off.
two.
That's really good. So I think also your paper had a very, very big study on state-owned enterprises versus JVs versus privately owned companies. And I think
Right.
the what essentially was the summary of the paper? Like, was it like JVs grew much faster than privately owned companies, or the bulk of the growth was taken by JVs? Is that
The China in 2006 was coming out of still coming out of a very much state-owned enterprise background, and foundries very much historically they were almost all state-owned enterprises. They were basically the captive metal casting facilities for making tractors or cars or whatever. Okay, so they were part of very large state-owned enterprises, much different than anything pretty much that has ever existed in India. So there were foundries that were out in the hinterlands of China that were, the the farming organizations in China, they actually could use their excess profits back at that time for quasi-private industry. So there were privately held foundries, uh, but not that many. Most foundries were still coming out of the state-owned enterprise era, if you will. So they a much different situation than India.
Correct. Correct. So, all right. How can we learn what Chinese did to quadruple their production and maybe emulate them in India?
Yeah.
What do you think the lesson is here?
Part of what happened in China, I don't think will happen in India and should not happen in India. India is an entirely different economy and political system and so on. But what happened in China was basically the monetization of property. Okay, so in India, you own property, right? You have a deed to your land. In China, the government had the deed to all the property. Okay, so as they decided to embrace capitalism, if you will, the government was the landowner. The government monetized the property by long-term leases or by encouraging cities and so on to monetize property, and they needed to invest that money into infrastructure. And the Chinese, again, they have a different form of concept of public goods. So if they needed to move 1 million people to build a dam or to build a highway or to build a high-speed rail line, those people moved, right? Uh, and so they built huge amounts of infrastructure. I mean, yes, they became an export powerhouse for a lot of castings, but they built a lot of internal infrastructure in a very short period of time, and that base loaded a lot of their metal castings growth. Okay, and then they got into making durable goods that required castings. They have by far now the largest automotive production capacity in the world. That requires a lot of castings. All types of machinery that they produce, trains, locomotives, everything requires casting. So they've been able to develop a very huge internal demand for castings. I don't see that happening in India as much as it has happened in China. Uh, India already has an infrastructure. It sometimes it doesn't work as well as it should, but it's improving. Uh, when I worked at Ashland and managed the Indian operations, I oftentimes had young Ashland managers from different businesses, some of them making their first international trip. And so they would go to China to look at the investment opportunities and how to grow their various businesses. And usually they'd go to China first, and then they would come to Mumbai, and I would meet them at the airport in the middle of the night, and they look around and see this throng of people, and we driving to the hotel in South Mumbai. They got an impression right away of India, and so they always wanted to know what India's it's way behind than China. I said, well, India is much different economy. India is organized chaos. It's a beehive in motion. It's
I live
never
in organized chaos.
it's never going to be China, nor should it be. And it's a good thing it's not China. So India, nothing happens driven by not I say nothing. Some things happen in India that are driven by the state, but India's foundries, they have to make money or they don't survive, right? China, that's not necessarily the case. There have been huge amounts of subsidy. There have been huge amounts of markets developed that maybe, shouldn't have been developed. I mean, there's as I understand it now, hundreds, if not thousands, of apartment buildings all over China that are sitting empty. There are airports that have hardly any flights. So a lot of infrastructure has been wastefully built. That's never going to that's never going to happen in India.
I think they can always find the people to accommodate apartments here.
Nothing gets done in India unless there's a solid demand, right?
Right, right. All right. So I think let's get into USA, right? I think because there's a lot going on here. So I'm going to ask you the cliche question: what is your whole take on the tariff situation, and how do you see things improving the months to come?
Oh my God, I don't. I'm tariffs. Tariffs is a moving target, isn't it? I mean, it depends. It depends on the hour of the day and what President Trump tweets. I mean, I don't know. It's a strange period. I've been kind of an international person from my youngest days. I worked on international projects, and for me, not to have free trade I can't even conceive of it. Having said that, India is not a free trader. I mean, I think we all can agree that India has protected markets in a number of ways. So, but what's happening now? I think at the end of the day, uh, there's a lot of uncertainty on the tariff scene. It's going to change and change again. But I think one thing that is becoming clear to me, and I know a lot of companies because we get their RFQs. Uh, the U.S. is trying to decouple at the government level, the federal government level. The U.S. is trying to decouple, in my opinion, supply chains from China. For whatever reason, that's what's happening. And so the supply chain position is changing for OEMs. Uh, Even if they're not going to completely pivot away from China, they're going to develop alternative supply situations. They're going to look at their businesses differently. So for castings, it's a natural that OEMs look at India, and that's definitely what's happening for castings, forgings, machine components. The U.S. is wide open right now for Indian uh, products. There's no doubt about it. And I think as Americans become more familiar with Indian capabilities, and as Indian capabilities continue to improve and become more sophisticated and so on, there's going to be more sourcing from India. But you never know. I mean, the trade situation between India and the U.S. is quite complex. Uh, Donald Trump, during his last administration, he was kind of beating up India to take more agricultural products, for example. Well, that's an issue, as you know, in India. A large part of the economy is still very much agricultural, and so politically, that's a challenge for India. But I think the government of India seems to be taking a very measured, positive, and I think smart approach to negotiating the tariff situation with the U.S. So hopefully, good things will come out of it.
Right. Where do you see US foundries going at the back of all this? Like, are they like optimistic on the situation? Like, what's happening in the US?
Yeah. Well, uh, that's a good question. I mean, I think what U.S. Foundries will do, and what frankly I would do if I were managing a business in the U.S. Uh, as tariffs go up, I would raise my prices, and I would get rid of the customers I didn't want. Right. So I don't know at what point in time tariff protection here turns into reinvestment into foundry capacity. I personally don't think that's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. I think the near term will be more expensive domestic prices, just because that's what you do. You protect you raise your prices as you can, and you get rid of the customers you've been wanting to get rid of because they're a pain in the they're a pain in the butt. They always are trying to negotiate lower prices. They don't value your terms and conditions. So okay, uh, now you can get rid of them. And that's what I can't imagine
Right.
that will happen. I mean, I've not spoken to any foundries here specifically about what they're doing in relation to tariffs, but I can't imagine they're not first trying to maximize their margins based on the new situation. That's what tariffs are. They're protection, right? So
Right.
protected market, raise price. And then if you run out of capacity, then maybe you reinvest some of that newfound profitability in capacity or whatever. But there's many aspects here. I mean, Indian foundries don't realize that a lot of the competition, particularly in iron casting, is south of our border. It's Mexico. There are huge numbers of Mexican foundries, and not all iron. I mean, you've got large aluminum automotive foundries in Mexico as well. So um, yeah, I think short term uh, things will just get more expensive here.
Right. Since you mentioned, what why aren't U.S. companies buying and sourcing from Mexico? Like, why are they coming so far all the way to Asia? Like, what's really the situation in Mexico?
I, well, the Mexican foundries, there are some excellent Mexican foundries, but they tend to be automotive focused. I mean, as you know, the automotive industry here, as well as heavy equipment, you know, the Caterpillars, the Deeres, and so on. They used to be very back integrated into excuse me, in the metal casting, but that's changed. You know, most of the automotives have gotten out of casting, particularly sand casting, particularly iron castings, and they outsource that to foundries in Mexico, Brazil, and so a lot of the iron foundries move south of the border, if you will. Mexico has not, to my understanding, really developed much investment casting. India is India. You know, there must be, I don't know, 10,000 investment casters. I mean, every
There are a lot. There are a
I,
lot.
yeah, I get an email every day from some Rajkot investment caster, and so I don't know how many there are, but there are a lot. So uh, there are different niche areas and so on that India is very proficient at, and that's what's growing compared to Mexico.
Right. Mike, I wanted to ask you, what is a normal labor salary like in the US? Like, how much are you paying per day, per hour, per day? What is a normal wage like for a foundry worker in the US?
Well, you know, I, I can't comment specifically, but generally speaking, U.S. labor rates fully loaded, that means including their social benefits and so on, are $40, $50 an hour. Uh,
That's 40,
yeah,
40 to
e-
$50 an hour.
yeah. Even for me to get my yard work done here in Western North Carolina is thirty to $40 an hour. I have to pay for yard work. Okay, so the U.S. has become very expensive for labor. There's no question about it. I mean, I can work at McDonald's, making hamburgers for $25 an hour. So this is an expensive place now. And I always emphasize that to my teammates in India. Uh, Mistakes, if they're made here, cost a lot of money to correct. And it's not just mistakes at the labor uh, area, but any engineer here, any time any problem is touched here, it costs customers a lot of money. So we work very hard at controlling uh, uh, mistakes. We keep the mistakes in India if there are any mistakes.
It's easy to rework things right here, right?
We do not export mistakes because it's costly here. So anyhow, yeah, it's expensive, and not only that, but there's a shortage of labor, and there's the one thing the Trump administration has been successful at is closing our border. So we don't have all of the flow of workers coming
Of
across our.
migrant workers from the south, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in fact,
So just
they're deporting uh, labor. And I learned back in my Ashland days. I specifically was looking for technical service people in the U.S. that were proficient in Spanish, because there were a lot of Spanish-speaking people showing up in U.S. Foundries, and I can't imagine that's changed. I'm sure there still are a growing number of Hispanics, Spanish-speaking people in U.S. Foundry, and there's no flow of those people now. In fact, it's going the opposite way. So there's a shortage of people. Labor is expensive. It's not a good situation for foundries, in my opinion, and I don't really see that improving. U.S. foundries have become very proficient at the productivity, at implementing equipment and technology that takes it into account a shortage of labor. So we're more productive in that regard, I think, in foundry use. We have a lot more robots now in foundry.
correct, yeah. So just for the record, we pay about I think about $10 per day for labor here in India,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think
The thing that's always I've always stressed with U.S. manufacturers, U.S. foundries, as they compete globally, it's not just the labor rate in the foundry. There's no doubt about it. That's a part of it,
right.
but it's much larger than that. The sales and administrative SG&A of a foundry operation in India is a fraction of what it is in the U.S. The ability to build a foundry anywhere in the world. In fact, that's one reason foundries moved to Mexico. But you can build a foundry grassroots to start up in China or India in a fraction of the time that you can build a grassroots foundry in the U.S. Capital costs for equipment, acquisition equipment, is much less expensive, generally speaking, in developing markets in India, China, and so on. So there's a lot of costs in the equation besides labor that, frankly, a lot of U.S. companies hadn't taken into account in their
Right,
competitive analysis.
right, right. All right. We have a few audience questions
Okay.
that I'm obliged to ask you. So the
Yeah,
first, since we
I see you were on LinkedIn. I got up at 4 in the morning, and there's Ian on LinkedIn asking for questions. So, okay, give me
I
your
figured
topic.
we might.
Yeah.
It was best to make this a little interactive, so I got everybody on LinkedIn involved, and we have about 5 questions that we've got so far. So
Okay.
the first is, since you mentioned from an investment casting foundries, his name is Tanay. The company is Siddha Lakshmi, and I think he's basically asking what are the prerequisites that Synergy looks for to onboard an investment casting foundry for US castings.
Well, it's the same as any manufacturer. I mean, Synergy again is very grounded in quality. So if you don't have the quality systems, and I don't mean just a piece of paper. Pieces of paper are, yes, they're important, but the Synergy team, I learned that from my days living in India. The Synergy team, they live and breathe actual quality, manufacturing quality. So you have to have the quality.
Right, right. So since we are on the topic of investment castings, our second question is from Chris Raghavan. So they have been very instrumental in with 3D printing, and their only customers are investment casting foundries. So he's
Yeah.
asking basically if you guys need to get a prototype of a casting very quickly. Is there a chance that I feel you could tie up mainly with Stratnell with 3D printing and maybe help the foundry get these patterns very quickly so that they could move to market and have a sample on a customer table much faster?
Yeah, it's a great use of 3D printing. And, I think I had mentioned to you in a previous discussion, I took a 3D printer to GIFA in
Right,
1996 to exhibit at
right,
the
right,
Ashland.
right,
That was technology that printed a ceramic shell. So the concept was to print a ceramic shell, fire the shell, and then use that as an example for investment casting. I was way way ahead of my time. It was a good exhibit at the Ashland booth because nobody had seen 3D printing, and so we had thousands of people, it seems, at our booth in 1996 at the Ashland GIFA. But uh, yeah, our team is familiar with 3D printing of all types. He could reach out to me later on. I have a weak point uh, for 3D printing. I think it's a superb technology. It has a lot of advantages in the right ways. In the U.S., there are companies making a living 3D printing sand cores. So they print the sand cores and sell the cores to foundries, and I think that's an interesting model for business.
right.
So yeah, I think India is a great place to be doing a lot of exploring with 3D printing. Yeah,
Right, right. So next we have Mr. Srivastava. He's a very experienced foundryman
yeah,
and very senior. Uh,
yeah.
he's basically asking uh, why did Indian foundries fall behind in your experience? Like, why have they not grown to the extent that China has in the last 20 years? I think you pretty much alluded that to a little bit, but if you could answer that, yeah.
Yeah, I think again, India overall is so much different than China in terms of what drives investment, what drives success. China has very much uh, basically subsidized in a huge way manufacturing, both to support its domestic requirements for infrastructure and targeted industries for growth like automotive. Uh, but in other ways as well. I mean, China's political success depends on keeping a lot of people employed, and so from that perspective, India has had a different competitive environment than China. Uh, China. One thing I have learned in looking at lots of RFQs coming from U.S. companies and competing with Chinese, particularly in higher volume castings. It makes a big difference the actual raw material input cost, the metal cost, the metal alloy cost, and China has an advantage. I mean, in various steel alloys, it can be significant 7, 8, 9% advantage
Correct.
China has. So
Yeah,
uh, so it's just a different mindset. I don't think India will ever become a China, nor should it be in terms of metal casting volume. I think India is going to develop much differently in metal castings, be much smarter, be driven by profit always. And
correct.
I, as far as I know, there aren't any huge government of India subsidies to foundries. So it's going to be much different situation and growth. I think at the end of the day, it'll be much healthier. It is much healthier for India, even though it may not feel like it all the time. Uh, Not having government subsidy, foundries have to really develop a strategy for growth and implement it well, and that's what's happening. That's what'll happen.
Correct. Correct. All right. Just two more. So, what globally, what do people in the US think about India versus China? Like, what is the perception that US citizens have of India? This is coming from Mr. Narendra from Elite Refractories.
That's an interesting question, and so one thing I always emphasize in talking with my team back at Synergy and in different uh, presentations I've made to Indians, uh, most Americans know a lot less about Indians than Indians know about Americans. That's just a fact. But most Americans don't know much about India, and what they do know is misconception, to be honest. Uh,
What
so,
what is what is that conception? That's what I'm getting at.
well, I mean, if an American does run across an Indian, it's usually it's their doctor. We have Indian doctors. It's the Gujarati that owns the gasoline station or the motel. It's the Indian restaurant owner. Having said that, yeah, I would say the majority of Americans still have not tried Indian cuisine. China, on the other hand, there's Chinese restaurants everywhere. There's a better understanding of Chinese. The other thing, though, a lot of Americans they really mistake all Asians as Chinese. So it could be Koreans, it could be any Indonesians even, and they think they're Chinese. So there's but interestingly, the vice president of America, his wife is Indian American, and we had a Indian woman, Nikki Haley, run in the primaries for president, and so it, Americans are becoming more and more familiar with India. Even these trade negotiations and so on that's happening, and the visits here of various high-level politicians to India. It's giving much more experience about India. Most Indian Americans, so first, second generation Indians that are born here, they tend not to go into manufacturing. They go into they go into IT, investment banking, medicine. So you don't see many in manufacturing, but there are some. There's an Indian American who's now running a very large metal castings business in Wisconsin. So uh, you know, it's a growth story in terms of Americans getting an appreciation of India. Uh, for me, it's been very positive. I mean, I, I've been an India fan from my very first visit in 1981, and continue to be so.
Right, right. So I think last one. If there are Indian foundries, like this is from Mr. Ashish from SG Engineering. So he runs a bronze foundry in Pune. So if Indians are looking to get into the US market to export castings, what do you think the right way is, the right path is, and how should they be doing it? Like, would you recommend them doing it directly, or would you recommend them going through synergy? I know this was a little bit of a biased question, but I mean, I'd like to know your answer.
A couple things I'll say. I mean, I get inquiries every week from Indian manufacturers, many foundries, wanting to work with me and develop the market. And anyhow, I always ask them a couple questions. One, I ask them, "Are you selling castings in China?" And they say, well, no, "Why would I sell castings in China?" I said, "Because you're going to compete with Chinese when you come to the U.S. market. It's as simple as that." And then I asked them, "When was your last visit to the U.S.?" And of course, many Indian foundrymen still have not come to the U.S. The Indian perception of the U.S. Is not necessarily always correct. And it's always a good thing, in my opinion, if you're going to enter a market. And I did this in my corporate career. Before we went into any market, we studied it very carefully. We spent a lot of time and money, frankly, understanding markets outside of North America, especially. And it's no different. I mean, and I can tell you one advantage the Chinese have had here in castings, they've been coming here for 15 years. And again, it was a matter of subsidies, I'm sure. But I can remember back in the 2004, 2005, plane loads of Chinese coming, I'm sure subsidized by the Chinese government, to various conferences and trade shows and exhibits and so on. And generally, it's starting to happen. There are more and more Indians showing up, for example, at the Cast Expo, the AFS Cast Expo, which is great. But the Chinese have understood the American markets. I think they've been more strategic in many cases, understanding the channels to market here, understanding the requirements here, understanding everything here requires spending some time here. Going direct is so hit and miss. I mean, how many emails do you think a potential customer gets from India today? They just kind of blanket delete, hundreds of emails. So uh, we work very hard at Synergy, uh, particularly right now when there are a lot of customers looking at India, at our website and search engine optimization. And I mean, I would much rather have one company who's already looking to source from India contact us than I would make 100 dry calls to try to get interested in India.
Right.
So
Basically,
uh,
you say it's a pull approach.
most foundries, frankly, should not depend so much on export. They really need to concentrate on their domestic customers. And I'll say a couple more things. The best export business for a metal caster is the castings exported from India in the form of a car, a tractor, any kind of durable good that has a casting in it. So choose customers wisely that are growing their business and are going to compete at least regionally. I mean, India is, Hyundai is a major manufacturer of cars in India, and a lot of the cars are exported. I would love to have castings in a Hyundai automobile, and the same goes with everything that's growing in manufacturing in India. Get your castings there. Uh, there are many procurement teams for large OEMs in India. I mean, Stanley Black and Decker, Caterpillar, Deere. The list goes on and on. They've got huge teams in India,
Correct.
so you don't have to go to the U.S. Get some business with them. If you want to.
I think I think that there's always been this sort of conception that if I export my castings out of the country, I might get better rates, right? I think that has always been a conception that foundries have over here. So is that a myth today, or do you think that is pretty much true? Like, do foundries exporting make more money than supplying them locally?
It depends. I mean, if you have a competitive advantage capability, and it happens to be in India, okay, uh, and there's a shortage of that capability in the U.S., then you can make more margin
Supply
perhaps
demand, basically.
in your export. U.S. customers generally pay on time better than sometimes Indian companies. So that's an advantage. So it depends. Right now, there seems to be a shortage in the U.S. of gravity aluminum casting, for example, certain steel castings. So if there are areas where there's a shortage here, and if you have those capabilities in India, and you can deliver consistently and on time and so on, then yeah, there are the possibilities of better margin and customers that pay on time. Yeah.
Right, right. Uh, Thank you, Mike. This has been really great. Thank you for making the time. Especially, I think you're just in the nick of time for your next appointment. Is there where can we find you? I mean, you're all over LinkedIn for sure. I'm going to leave your LinkedIn link in the description.
LinkedIn, I try to respond to my LinkedIn requests. You can share my email.
Yeah,
My Synergy email is Mike at India Synergy.com. And
right.
most people who want to find me, they find me.
All right. So I'll put all your social links in the description.
Very good.
And is there anything else you'd like to add, or are we good?
I want to commend you for what you're doing. I think it's just an extraordinary job.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're bringing India Foundrymen into the social media arena in a big way.
I wouldn't say it has been an uphill battle. But
And lastly, I'll take one of those shirts that you're wearing. So please send me
yeah.
one. I like
Thank
that.
you. I will. If you do manage to make it to our event next year in Mumbai, I'll definitely bring along a shirt.
Okay. Well, I'm planning on it.
Yeah.
I love Mumbai, and the location's great. So I'm going to try to make it.
Right. Right. See you, Mike. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hey, take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.